Greetings. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. I'm Elxir, and today I want to do something a little bit different. So besides this YouTube channel, I'm an artist. I started doing graffiti as a teenager, and that was the first art form that I became pretty decent at, and I enjoyed it. Although as a teenager, I wasn't concerned with the legality of it, and we do train yards and stuff like that, billboards, rooftops on the 7 line, the M train. As I got older, it's like the amount of trouble that you could get into for doing graffiti was not worth the art form, but I continued doing it mostly on paper. And right before COVID, I got into canvas painting through thinking about mercurial workings that I was doing, which actually helped inspire wanting to speak and do this YouTube channel. And I was thinking about, if I was doing a graffiti piece, what would I do with the occult in graffiti? And I thought about the planets, and Mercury obviously came to mind, and I'm like, oh, well, I could get paint markers, and I could do like oranges, maybe some yellows for the air aspect, and maybe I could write the word Hode in graffiti style. And that kind of inspired a 10-piece canvas series that I did on the 10 Sephiroth, where I wrote the names of the Sephiroth in graffiti style and surrounded many of the correspondences from the magician's tables around the graffiti word. And that set sold for, I believe, $550 or something like that a couple years ago. And the fact that that sold really inspired me to continue making art. I started doing steles, the stele of revealing. I've done 16. I've sold 15 of 16, and I'm about to start a 17th stele. I'm actually doing the plaster work on it right now. It's drying. I'm looking at it over there. And I had a piece of wood that I cut, but the measurements weren't good enough for the size that I needed. It was about 1 inch or 2 short, and I didn't want to throw the wood away, so I had it for a long time. A friend came over a couple weeks ago to my apartment, and I was showing them, because they also paint steles. And I was showing them, and I saw the piece of wood that I had. I'm like, oh, I never did anything with this. I didn't want to throw it out. And I let it just sit there out in the open for a couple days so I didn't forget about it. And I was ruminating, what could I put on this stele? And so what this video is going to be about is a stele to Apophis that I made. Now, I don't take donations for this YouTube channel. I don't ever want people giving me money for sharing about the occult. I consider it a sort of teaching in a sort of way. It's not personal one-on-one style teaching, but it's stuff that I've been given for free, so I don't ever want to profit off of these YouTube videos. However, the society we live in does require people to make money in order to feed themselves, clothe themselves, house themselves. So as an artist, it's how I've been surviving for the past 7 years or so. So if you ever do want to support me, bolskine.net, which there's a link in the description, has many of my artworks available on it. Also on my Facebook, I always share my art pieces and the price that I ask for the canvases or steles that I make. And today I want to talk about this stele that it took a month to make, the stele to Apophis. My asking price is a little bit higher than most things I make. It's $777 plus shipping, which the price is so high partly because it took a month of work. The supplies are also somewhat expensive, and I'm very attached to it. It's one of my favorite pieces that I've made. In my opinion, it's the best piece I've ever made. And the price is so high because I don't particularly want to give it up. So if nobody's willing to pay that much for it, I'm okay with that. Many of my art pieces range around $120 to $150, so they're a lot more accessible. If you're interested, check the link in the description. My fiance also sells his jewelry, and there's another artist gonna write some of his prints and paintings are also available on Bolskine Works. So check that out. But whether you're interested in buying this stele or just looking at it and hearing about it, this is what that video is gonna be. So this is completely unscripted, and I wanna go over not the inspiration, just the symbolism, what's going on in the stele, because Apophis is very near and dear to me. Now, you might think, hearing Apophis, it's like a god of chaos, and you might even think like Typhonian tradition or something, and I am not Typhonian tradition at all. I am strictly a Thelemite, and my interest in Apophis is very, very closely linked with Crowley's Liber LXV. And in that text, I'll quote some stuff in a few minutes. Crowley actually kind of attributes Apophis to Adonai. So there's a connection with the heart center, Iao, Isis, Apophis, Osiris, Iao, the Gnostic name for Jehovah, something very similar to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, but a Gnostic Greek version. So Apophis to me is very closely linked with that concept of the HGA. So let's get into the symbolism. It's a front and back stele with gold trim around the edges. And on the front, you'll see it's actually a hieroglyphic style of myself wearing a towel robe with a hood. And there is a slit in the center of the chest and a bloody dagger, which represents the mind. The dagger, it's an airy symbol, the intellect, the ruach. And the heart is the center, Tifereth. The heart is the center of the ruach, the intellect, the intellectual part of the soul. So it's an offering of the ego to this quote-unquote malignant chaos deity. Now, in Egypt, Apophis was very, very, very disliked. They had rituals for spitting on the snake, squashing snakes. Snakes were venomous. They were dangerous. They would eat small livestock, whether probably chickens, eggs, rabbits. I don't know particularly what they had in livestock in ancient Egypt, but I do know that snakes were not always, they were either very revered or completely hated. And the mythology of Apophis is that he was the umbilical cord of, I believe, Ra or Horus, probably Horus, and cut off. And this piece of a god that was cut off from the womb of Isis, this umbilical cord, because it's a part of a deity, became conscious and grew into a massive size. And every day Ra's ship would sail the sky, and Nuit would consume it in the nighttime, in the evening, and rebirth it in the morning. So it's like the sky is Nuit in ancient Egypt, and so in the west is her mouth, in the east is her genital area, and so she would consume it, the sun, and rebirth it in the morning. And every day Set and Horus, or Ra, would try to fight off Apophis, who was trying to destroy the sun. So there's a lot of symbolism there, centered around the heart, the conscious mind, the intellectual part of the soul of Kabbalah. And so for me, Apophis, I don't hold him as like this malignant destroyer deity. How I see it is more like, if you don't have your house in order, even goetic spirits, if like you deal with them, it really just speeds up your karma. So nothing can happen to you. If somebody summons a demon in your general direction, right? Those low spirits can only affect you karmically based on what would happen to you anyway, based on your previous actions, whether this incarnation or a former incarnation. So if somebody gets a demon summoned at them, all it can do is speed up your karma. So that has very devastating effects. However, it was going to happen to you anyway based on your actions. So I see Apophis in the same way. If you have your house in order, all it could do is speed up your karma. If you're living, let's say, delemically in line with the Tao, and you're doing your true will, you're living in the path of no thing, where you're not doing anything outside of your will, so you're literally in harmony with the universe around you. You're in union with the light and the all and the not. Nothing is going to be able to speed up your karma because you've completely destroyed your karma. So like the master of the temple still has karma, and they must burn up that karma into a very fine ash, which gets placed in the urn when they become a magus. So in my view, the magus does not have karma, but the master of the temple does. So if you're living karmaless, Apophis cannot do anything to you. However, if you're living a very foul, very unintentional life, if you're not doing your will, whatever you're doing wrong, you need to grow from that. So things have to happen that teach you what you're doing wrong in your life. There has to be consequences in order for us to learn, and that's just how the universe operates. When you fuck up, when you hurt somebody else, you're hurting yourself, because everything is one. Everything is the same source. Everything comes from the same source. Everything, even though there's the illusion of division, everything is Nuit and Hadid in union. If the universe is infinite, Where is the center of that infinite universe? Well, that center is everywhere. So then Hadid is also everywhere that Nuid is. So there's no actual differentiation. Everything is still from that one source. Everything is essentially what you would call the light or God. It just clothed in opaque matter that causes the illusion of division. So if you hurt another person, or if you're not doing your true will, you're hurting yourself by hurting anything else. By abusing the all, if by abusing one part of the universe, you're abusing the all, because everything is one, everything is God. You're actually, if you're mad at somebody else and you go to take action to harm them, you are only hurting yourself, because that person is one with you. We are all of the same source, we are all of the same substance. We might have individual consciousness, we are just a unique point observing ourselves as God, if that makes sense. So Apophis to me is a very teaching-oriented deity. It's a very harsh learning lesson deity, but those are like the ones that I think we grow from the most. When we experience pain, we learn not to touch the hot stove. So like in the formula of IAO, Isis is when you're beginning a new practice and it's going amazing and you're just killing it and everything's perfect. Every time you sit in an asana, it goes so well. Well, you do that for a couple weeks or months and suddenly it becomes very hard to do. You get very irritable trying and you fail and you fail and you fail. That's the dark night of the soul, the Apophis phase. If you give up, you're not going to get that growth that comes in the Osiris phase. But if you persevere, regardless of not getting your results, regardless of how irritable it makes you, regardless of how difficult it's become to even think about sitting in that asana, if you power through the Apophis phase, you're going to come into the Osiris phase and something really huge, something impactful is going to happen in your life. You're going to grow tremendously when Apophis phases come. So that's one aspect of why I like Apophis so much. It's a very teaching-oriented figure. You learn a lot from the Apophis phase. It's very harsh, but it's very powerful in terms of growth. So Liber LXV, Cordis Sincte Serpente, the heart girt with the serpent, that's symbolizing the Orphic egg being surrounded by the snake. So that's like the womb surrounded by the seed. It's symbolizing the act of being able to create. So as an artist, my creation comes from these meditations on, and there's a lot more. There's the holy guardian angel, which is the serpent coiled around the egg, which is the passive. It's like the holy hexagram, the passive upright triangle, which is blue, and the averse red triangle. So it's like the passive adept calling up to the highest and waiting, and the holy guardian angel actively descending upon them and coming into union. So it's a microcosmic figure. So that's the heart girt with the serpent in short. It's the conscious mind. And there's these definite two polarities. There's the serpent and the egg. There's the active and the passive. So in the very center of the front of the stele, I have an Orphic egg made of like this astral blue light with a white star in it, which to me symbolizes kind of like the Ka or the Kabs, the star where Hadid represents in the center thereof of your being. And it's coiled with the snake. And I did these two primary colors, blue and red, just to symbolize like very high light, primary colors are definitely like Chakma could be blue, Vina could be red. Chakma is also white, flecked, yellow, blue, red. So it's Kether is just pure white, and then Chakma is like the first prism, that first rainbow colors coming through the prism of Kether. So there's a lot of like supernal symbolism with sun and moon going on here. I have the serpent and the egg, and then the lotus at the highest point, so it's kind of symbolizing the enlightened Kether, the lotus, but it's also the yoni, so it's also yesod. So there's some cool symbolism going on there, with a white point in the center of the lotus. At the very top of the front of the stele, I have this arched letter, Egyptian hieroglyph, which is often used to symbolize Nuit if they're not going to draw her. So it's like an arched Egyptian hieroglyphic letter. I'm guessing that it's the letter N. I'm not super versed in hieroglyphics. So in the book of the law, worship me, let the rituals ever be unto me. or face the punishments of Ra Horkuit. I'm butchering the quote, but you get the gist if you're familiar with the Book of the Law. So it's everything that I always do, regardless of any other figure that I'm working with, there's always an aspect of that figure is part of the all. To me, Nuit is one of the highest aspects of reality. Let the worship be ever unto me, or expect the direful judgments of Ra Horkuit. So I always put Nuit at the top of everything that I do. And in many, many, many steles, Nuit is always on the border. She's always encompassing everything that's going on. So it symbolizes to me that Nuit is the circumference where the play of life happens in her infinite space. So it's still about worship of Nuit as the highest for me. She's one of my favorite deities in the Thelemic pantheon, just in general, in any pantheon. So as I said, Apophis to me is like a speeder up of karma. There's an aspect of the holy guardian angel. And so this is me offering my heart unto this entity to help me reach the highest, reach this lotus, this open lotus, this enlightenment, this sahasrara, so to speak. Even the sun and moon under the lotus kind of to me symbolize the yin and the yang, which come from the Tao Te. And it's like the Tao Te is the zero, which has these two polarities in perfect union, so you can't tell the difference between them. But then it breaks off into male and female, right? And I actually put sun on the left and moon on the right, even though the pillar of severity is on the left and the pillar of mercy is on the right. So I actually switched the polarities to symbolize that yin-yang, a switching of the polarities. If you notice, there's two brown boxes with hieroglyphics. I just honestly used a hieroglyphic translator online on the left. So there's smaller on the top hieroglyphics, and then there's like a dagger, two boxes, and a coiled serpent with bumps and daggers on it, or feathers on its back. So though the dagger, two boxes, and serpent are the actual hieroglyphic for Apophis or Apep. But above that, the two little hammer-looking things, the bird, a bent line, an eye, a rectangle with a line in it, squiggly line, and then a half of an oval. That just translates as the serpent and then Apep. On the right is actually a magical motto of mine, Hillel, which is an abbreviated form of the English term hell is loveless. And so there's something very close to me about that phrase. Hell is loveless. Hell being this abominable, tormented place, right? This abyssal wasteland of desolence. So that, to me, what that is, that place would be loveless. So when you have love in your life, when you're living love, when you're actively expressing love as the law, love under will, every action is an action of love, the uniting of two opposites into union. You're not in hell, and I see hell as a place here and now, or heaven as a place here and now, and you create your hell, you create your heaven. So if you're not living and taking actions based on love, in any sense, whether it's mundane or mystical, you're creating your own personal hell. When you're actively taking actions based on love, you're creating your own personal heaven. Then there's like this bar of light blue, green, and almost like green-blue lines, little squares. I wanted to just segment the images on the top from this paragraph on the bottom. And so those green-blue colors are very reminiscent of the path of noon. So noon is path 24, and Apophis is actually attributed to path 24, Apep. And path 24, noon, is the death card. So it's kind of like this decaying green matter. And in order to give up the consciousness, there's a symbolic death that has to happen of the consciousness in order to come into union. So if you're in union with the supernals, you can't have an individual consciousness. The one has to be absorbed into the many. So you become the all. So there's a lack of ego that happens in that phase. So that's, to me, what the death card symbolizes. So there's an aspect of this chaos destroyer deity being the destroyer of karma, being the destroyer of the ego through the speeding up of karma, through getting rid of that baggage as quick as possible. And then the paragraph on the bottom of the front is the opening lines of Liber LXV. I am the heart and the snake is entwined about the invisible core of the mind. Rise, O my snake, it is now as the hour of the hooded and holy ineffable flower. Rise, O my snake, into brilliance of bloom on the corpse of Osiris afloat in the tomb. O heart of my mother, my sister, mine own, thou art given to Nile, to the terror typhoon. Ah, me! But the glory of ravening storm ensuades thee and wraps thee in frenzy of form. Be still, O my soul, that the spell may dissolve, as the wands are upraised and the aeons revolve. Behold in my beauty how joyous thou art, O snake that caresses the crown of mine heart. Behold, we are one, and the tempest of years goes down to the dusk and the beetle appears. O beetle, to the drone of thy dolorous note, be ever the trance of this tremulous throat. I await the awaking, the summons on high, from the Lord Adonai, from the Lord Adonai. So there's a lot of sexual symbolism. The hooded and holy ineffable flower, the clitoris, so it's like the center of that lotus piece, like the clitoris, it's the female phallus. The rise of my snake, it's the kundalini, which is the male component that rises up the spine, which is also phallic and serpentine, into the base of the skull, which is this cup. The skull is a cup. It's, if you look at Liber HHH, Crowley makes these correspondences of the kundalini rising up the serpentine, the male kundalini force rising up the serpent spine, which is male, into the nuid. So that would be hadid rising up into nuid. So if you see it in the Stele revealing, the winged disc, behedi, I think it's Beyuhedi symbol, the winged disc, in the Stele revealing, what we call now hadid, is the soul of the deceased rising up into the heavens, into Nuit. So it's very symbolic, this kundalini force rising up the phallus, or the phallus becoming erect and coming into the flower. So there's a lot of sexual symbolism, but it represents the kundalini force rising up into the base of the skull. And as that kundalini force rises up, at the bottom of this paragraph where it says, be ever the trance of this tremulous throat, the Dath is in the place of the throat, or as it would be called, the Vishuddhi chakra. So Dath separates the Ruach from the Neshama, or the lower spheres, the lower 7 spheres from the upper 3 spheres. So Dath is that boundary between heaven and the universe, the spiritual and the physical. So the Kundalini breaks that and helps unite these two different aspects of self, the highest self and the lowest self. So there's a lot of cool symbolism going on here. That's a lot of the gist of the front. And just to take a look at the back, so it's very, very, very based on alchemy. Now, I'm not a traditional alchemist. There is alchemy in the Lima in terms of sexual alchemy, symbolic alchemy. You can definitely be a chemist alchemist. That is totally cool in the Lima. If that's your calling, it is not necessarily my calling. So the Negredo would actually be the black sphere, and nobody's said this, and I'm surprised, but that would actually be on the bottom. That would be the first phase of alchemy. Now I changed the Albuero, which is white, with the Negredo, which is black. I actually switched those two processes. And a lot of times alchemy will be only 3 phases, the Negredo, Albuero, and either the yellow or red. You usually don't use both. So the yellow is Citrinitas, and the Rubero would be the red, Rubero. So I used for convenience of the way I wanted to express what's happening on an initiatory path when you're doing the great work. I broke it down into these 4 phases to loosely symbolize the 4 worlds, which I think is pretty cool. And actually puts white at the bottom instead of white at the top, which is kind of funny, but it's following an alchemical track, which is much different than a Kabbalistic track of initiation. So on the left, there are 4 birds. You have a dove, a crow, a hawk, and a phoenix. In the center, you have these 4 circles, which I was going to make spheres at first, but then as I had painted them, and before I'd done any other symbolism, I just had these 4 circles on the back, which bleed into each other. So you have white and black, and there's a gray overlapping. You have black, then yellow, and when you mix black and yellow paint, it turns into this kind of greenish olive color. And then yellow bleeds into the red, and there's an orange overlap. As I painted these 4 circles and I had taken a break for the night, I was looking at the stele where I had put it on the floor to dry. It was standing up, and I saw astral light around each of the circles. So it was like 4 different portals had opened up from them. And from there I was like, I'm not going to turn these into spheres. They're going to remain as portals. So then I was thinking, what can I do with them to emphasize what's going on with these 4 phases of this alchemical symbolism that I'm creating? And thinking about it, like, if you see like the OTO the dove is really the particle of the Eucharist in the Gnostic Mass being dropped into the cup. Now, if you don't know what that means, think about it. What does the cup symbolize? Right, the cup is very feminine. What gets dropped into the female's cup? The particle, the source of creation, the body of the magician, the thing that comes out of the serpent. So on the bottom right, you see these, well, on the right, you see 4 different, 2 flasks, a beaker at the bottom, and an alembic. So on the bottom is a beaker with a serpent's fang excreting venom. I didn't want to draw another whole serpent, so I just did a serpent's fang, and it's excreting a very white venom into this beaker, and it's creating this splashing up effect as it drops down into the beaker. Now, if you see that little circle with like a sideways T, that symbol is the alchemical symbol for vitriol, the philosopher's stone, right? So there's a lot of male sexual symbolism going on with that dove descending into the cup like you'd see in the OTO Lamin. And I put the symbol of Leo in the white circle, which, what does the symbol of Leo look like? Leo is the only zodiac that corresponds with the sun, right? What is the sun? The sun is the male symbol, the Lord, right? So there's a very, I'll just say, so it represents the seed, like you would see in the Hermit card, the spermatozoan, which is not necessarily strictly mundane sex. It's representing the spark of creation within each and every single person as a magician. To do your true will is to create. To create is to be divine. We are able to create because we are the closest evolved form to God so far on our planet. I don't know of any other species that actually worships whatever that is that created the universe, right? So there's a connection between us and the divine that differentiates us from other animal forms. So that seed represents the true will of the magician. So I put the symbol of the Leo because it represents, not to mention I'm a sidereal Leo, so it's very closely linked with me anyway, but yeah, the dove, that symbol of Leo, which represents the spermatozoan, and the serpent's fang excreting its venom, followed by a sign of vitriol, which is the philosopher's stone, which kind of symbolizes that same thing. Now the negredo, the black phase, the crow represents, again, death. It's definitely, out of these, it's the most closely linked with the Apophis phase. They are a decomposer, right? A bird of prey. They will eat the decomposing matter to sustain themselves, crows. Just like once you have an alchemical process, it's going to turn black, no matter what your mostly, I'm not going to say every alchemical project, but most alchemical tinctures, chemicals turn black as either when they're heated up or just after enough time. Once chemicals are extracted from plant matter, that plant decays and the liquid goes from either clear or white to black. The 2 little symbols next to the alembic, which is being heated up, which I've spoken about this in my Sex Magic Part 2 video, that's the heat of the under the cucurbit. The cucurbit is, again, the cup, the yoni. And so the heat is the friction, it's the passion, it's the dying of the ego in the orgasm or orgia, in the orgia, which could be prayer, it could be ecstasy of union with God, it can be sexual alchemy, it could be a whole host of things. But those two little black symbols, the one on the bottom, which looks like a pitchfork, is the symbol for putrefaction in alchemy. And the little A-looking symbol is of the alembic, which is this little circular glass tube that's being held up. The next tier up is and the reason these bleed into each other, like the white and black have gray, the black and yellow have green in between, and yellow and red have orange in between. It's because one phase goes into the other. So there's a liminal space in between there that I wanted to symbolize. I could have done smaller circles and separated them, but any alchemical project, any part of your great work, one phase is definitely linked with the next phase. So there's a kind of EAO. Even though that's 3 E-A-O, I-A-O, there's 3 letters, they make up one word. One phase is definitely linked with the next phase, and that phase is linked with the next phase. They're not separate things, even though they're represented by 3 different symbols. So, like the dove is surrounded by the gray, I wanted it to represent that first phase is so interlinked with the second phase. The crow is surrounded by that green olive color. It's linked with the next phase, and so on. So on the citrinitas, the yellow, it's a very solar phase. You've already extracted the process. Now you're taking the vegetable matter out, and you're going to extract the salt from that vegetable matter which has been decayed, and you're actually going to set that vegetable matter on fire, and then you're going to extract the salt from it by putting that ash of that vegetable matter back into the alchemical liquid. So there's something very solar. There's a reusing of the dead matter, so it's kind of like a rebirth phase. Hawks are also birds of prey, but they're more solar, so the yellow is almost like a gold. And then the salt phase, so you're extracting that salt. But when I do, especially like sexual magical alchemy, you're taking these ingredients that are harvested, ingredient X, and I always mix them with abramelin oil. So abramelin oil, again, is a very solar agent. Cinnamon, galangal, olive oil. Olive oil is more earthy, but it's still that bright yellow gold color. So abramelin oil, especially the galangal and cinnamon, are both solar. So if you notice the little yellow sun-looking symbol with 4 lines sticking out of it at the quarters, without the dot in the center, just that circle with the 4 quartered lines and dash marks, that's the symbol for olive oil. So I added a dot in the center to make it more solar looking, and to my mind that represents abramelin oil. It's not obvious, that's not an actual alchemical symbol. The olive oil is alchemical, but putting a dot in the center to me made it more solar, made it more representative of abramelin oil. And finally, we have the Mercury phase. We went through this whole cycle of death, and now we're reborn. Anytime you do a magical operation, it is changing who you were when you started it to when you completed it. You're coming out renewed, a whole new being. That's the phoenix. That's the mass of the phoenix. That is the ritual rebirth that comes from doing the great work. Rising up to the top out of the ashes of whatever you've had to burn up through your karma that you've had to get rid of by going through these processes. So you're reborn, and so the red, the rubedo, is the completed product, and I put the gold, Mercury, there to symbolize the completion of the alchemical great work. And so there's like a red container with some bubbling gold. This gold is solar. Gold is, a very sacred thing. It's the highest. In alchemy, you turn lead into gold. So I wanted that gold to be symbolized in the rubedo phase. And so it's the phoenix, it's the rebirth. And then if you see like the solar symbol again on the right of the container of the little flask, and it's gold with some pen lines, it's actually, I wanted it to be a sun and moon conjoined. And I could have done the mark of the beast, but I wanted it to be a little less obvious. So I just made one sign fatter. So it's actually a moon on the right side and then a thinner circle for the sun. So it's the sun and moon conjoined. So it's the androgyny, the kether, the highest, the Tao Te, the union of these two polarities, which have been synthesized from the one into the many. That's basically the gist of the symbolism. The last thing I could say is I kind of used a little reference from the Stele revealing, and I put a little painted sticker at the top. It says 161. To me, that's my spelling of Apep. If you transliterate English letters into Hebrew, I spell Apep A-P-P, Aleph, Pe, which is 161. I don't include the E, which would make it 166. 161 actually has some very interesting words under it. For example, the heavenly man, the primordial man, Adam, and then I don't know exactly how to pronounce this. It's Ayin, Yod, Lamed, Aleph, He. So the primordial man is one of the words given under 161. Another word is the congregation of the eternal. And then the third word given in Liber 500 under 161 is 4 letters, which are the paths of the inferior beard. Kaf, Yod, Nun, Aleph. So the beard of the inferior man is the microcosmic deity. So there's a lot of cool stuff with the number 161 besides for that I'm not going to get into. It's just a little bit personal to me. Maybe one day I'll talk about Apophis a lot more. But this is my Stele to Apophis and the symbolism going on here. I thought it was really cool. I am going to do a video about poisons, so I don't want to give too many spoilers on that. The last thing I will say, there's an aspect of, for me, and nobody's ever talked about this, Apophis and the poison of Apophis spoken about in Liber LXV being what is used to create the elixir of life, which is that red and gold tincture at the top of the back. So if you look at Liber 65, especially chapter 4 of Liber LXV, verses 24 and 25, Arise, O serpent Apep, thou art Adonai, the beloved one. Thou art my darling and my Lord. And thy poison is sweeter than the kisses of Isis, the mother of the gods. For thou art he, yea, thou shalt swallow up a sea and a Zar, Isis and Osiris, and the children of Ptah. Thou shalt pour forth a flood of poison to destroy the works of the magician. Only the destroyer shall devour thee. Thou shalt blacken his throat. So again, that's the Vishuddhi chakra, breaking between the supernals and the lower triads. Wherein thou shalt blacken his throat, wherein his spirit abideth. Ah, serpent Apep, but I love thee. And then there's more in chapter 5, and there's also some mention of the poison of the uræus serpent. And then in Liber Aleph, there's a bunch about poison and uniting with the things that scare you most, that you most recoil from. And exposure to those things, you build up tolerance to them, and you start to uproot those things that you're afraid of, and they make you a more complete person. You're not influenced by your fears anymore, which deep down in the most unconscious levels, we make decisions based on what's in our unconscious. So when you have fears deep down that you're not aware of, you're making decisions based on stuff that you don't even know why you're making things. So when you expose yourself to the things that to you are most taboo, you start to uproot stuff that you would not have otherwise been aware of, and you get rid of those fears completely. So whatever you recoil from, exposure to them is your poison. The things you're afraid of are your poison. Whatever you dislike the most is your poison. Let's say you don't like orange juice, you hate orange juice. To you, that's a poison because it causes you discomfort or unpleasure or whatever you want to call that. Exposure to it until the point that you've grown accustomed to liking it. This is a very crude example, but exposure to that juice, longer and longer and longer, you will eventually change your taste buds to the point that you could tolerate it. When you can tolerate it, you have removed that recoiling that comes up. Everything is God. So to recoil from anything is to recoil from God. And so obviously if you don't like a food, that's different, but I'm just trying to give an example to make the point. Whatever you're afraid of, let's say you hate gay people. If you're afraid of gay people, you should go spend a lot of time around gay people until you fully understand them to the point that it should not matter to you what another person does to your body. If you recoil seeing 2 men kiss, maybe there's something there in your unconscious that you've been taught is wrong that needs to be uprooted, because to me, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you have to engage in it, but to get rid of that recoiling factor, there's something there that you need to take a look at. So whatever your poisons are, whatever it is that you fear most, let's say you're afraid of spiders. Exposure therapy to spiders will in fact allow you to overcome that fear. You know? So I'll talk more about poisons in a whole separate video, but that, to me, consuming the poison of Apep creates an ego death. The death of that ego allows you to unite with the all. Uniting with the all allows you to essentially become God. Becoming one with the eternal is to live forever. When you become conscious of the fact that everything is God, when you could intellectually understand that, but until you experience what that feels like, you do not know what that is. So when you come into union through that ego death with the eternal, you've taken the elixir of life. So the poison of Apep, which speeds up your karma, destroys the ego, allows you to cross that abyssal plane and come into union with the eternal, is to live forever. Love is the law, love under will. Again, don't feel pressured to support me. I don't do these YouTube videos for that, but join my occult art group, which I just started. And if you feel inclined, if you like any of the things that I've made art-wise, or if you want something specific custom that you think I could do, or that you'd be interested in me doing, I am totally willing to take custom orders. But check out Bolskine Works, and check out my new Facebook group. That's also linked in the description below. It's called Occult Art. It's on Facebook. Yeah, at least take a look at Bolskine. There's jewelry, there's artwork, there's a bunch of really cool stuff there. Custom jewelry pieces my fiance will also do. And silver, brass, or bronze rather, yellow or white bronze. They're both very reasonably priced. If you want 18 karat gold, I mean, you're paying for the material, so it's more expensive. But, you know, he does take custom orders, and I do take custom orders. I do sell steles of revealing, and this stele is also available. Don't feel pressured to support me, but if you want to support me as an artist, that is how I make my living. I don't make my living doing these YouTube videos. I don't have the following, nor if I had the following would I take money from talking about the occult. To me, that's just an ethical boundary. I practice a Rosicrucian-based system. I'm doing this strictly to help other people. So hopefully you learned something about Apophis from this video. And if not, I hope that you at least appreciate the symbolism that I've painted. It took a lot of hard work. So again, love is the law, love under will. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.